This is Anna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. I'm excited today. We're going to have a conversation with Dr. Latanya Agard a bit about the 2024 Annual Homelessness Assessment Report and the point-in-time count. However, before I welcome Dr. A on, I do want to alert you to some news that we have been trying really hard to understand a bit further this morning. So yesterday, the Office of Budget and Management released a memo, M-2513, that calls for the temporary pause of federal agency grant, loan, and other financial assistance programs. It is going to call on federal agencies and says that they must, and this is a quote, temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance and other relevant agency activities that may be impacted by the executive orders. We have several calls into the members of our federal delegation as well as the folks across our network in hopes of gaining some clarity on the full impact of what this means. We do know that most of the housing and community development programs are impacted or could be impacted, as well as disaster recovery, any dollars tied to those things. So again, we are trying to get more clarity about the legality, about the duration, and about the full scope of impact that this executive order will have on our work. So later in your inboxes today, you will receive a call to action. And as we continue to understand this memo and this executive order a bit better, we will release that information to you. But we are definitely trying to keep an eye on it and understand how much of our work it is going to change and shift. Switching gears, I want to remind everyone that our 2025 county profiles are now live. And so if you haven't already checked out your county profile or the state profile, make sure that you do so. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, our guest speaker today, Dr. Latanya Agard. Just give you a little bit of her amazing bio. She's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness and has a wealth of leadership experience within the faith community, higher education, nonprofits, as well as mental health. She holds several degrees, including a bachelor's in chemistry and a master's in English from the University of Alabama, a master's in divinity from Duke University Divinity School, and a doctorate of ministry from Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. She's worked in higher education and focused on mentoring first-generation African-American students, helping to build their capacity for resilience, and also has taught at the University of Alabama, Miles College, Barton College, and Duke Divinity School. She is a local pastor and church planter and has led many communities of faith to consider the dynamic relationships between the Christian praxis and professions of faith. This is part of the transformative work that fuels her interest to connect the tenets of her faith with the practical needs of marginalized communities, which is partly reflected in her work to establish One Wake, an IAF affiliate in Wake County, her job as a case manager for the Support Circle program for homeless families, and her service on several nonprofit boards of directors. In 2021, she joined the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness as a consultant to begin guiding the agency through the difficult process of identifying and dismantling racism and racist practices. This collaborative relationship challenged staff and the board of directors to redefine its value, reframe its mission and vision. And as executive director, Dr. A continues to lead the Coalition to End Homelessness and transform its workplace culture as they continue to serve people experiencing homelessness across North Carolina. Dr. A, are you on the line with us?
Good morning, Stephanie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
So I know you're no stranger to the housing call, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. Recently, the 2024 Annual Homelessness Report, Part 1, was released in late December. And that report showed that there was the largest number of people experiencing homelessness on record. Can you talk a bit about your reactions to this? And then when it came to North Carolina, what stood out to you?
Yeah, my reaction initially was honestly dismay, but not shock. Not shock because we have seen this trend happening for a while, and I would say, since the ending of so many programs that allow people to stay in their homes during COVID, once those programs sunset and the financial assistance that people were receiving, as well as other supports in the community, once those things sunset, we saw many people not able to pay their rent. We saw a lot of folks, of course, unable to halt their evictions. And now what we're seeing with other factors in our community is that homelessness is rising. It's rising in every population covered in the report except for veterans. I think that was the one bright light that we saw in the AHAR report. In every other category, we saw an increase in homelessness. And I think what is most alarming is that we see an increase in homelessness for the unsheltered population, people who are living in dwellings or places that are not meant for human habitation, on sidewalks, in tents, in wooded areas, in vehicles, abandoned buildings, and anywhere else people can lay their heads. We saw that nationally, and the North Carolina report, or the figures from North Carolina, reflect the same thing. What I would say that this is an alarming trend that really deserves our support to end, and our voice in order to advocate for people who are most vulnerable in our society.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think the data definitely shows a lot of those trends. And I think similar to you, I'm always upset when I see the trends increasing like they have been, but never surprised because being in this work, we understand what leads to that. We've had this conversation a few times over the last few years, and we've asked similar questions. Can you tell me what your thoughts are about what you've seen in the last 3 years regarding homelessness and the level of need in North Carolina?
When I think about my time in this position and what I've seen, I think the biggest thing I would say is that, we need to stop considering homelessness as a minor issue in our society here in North Carolina. The rates are increasing, I would say, alarmingly. Just to point out a few things from the current AHAR report, we see that the overall homelessness count in North Carolina for the 2024 PIC count increased over 19%. Overall, families with children, that figure increased over 26%. And we've seen these numbers increase over and over and over. The largest increase we've seen, as we said, is with the unsheltered homeless population. These are our most vulnerable people, and that increase was 31.4% from 2023 to 2024. There are over 4,500 people in 2024 who were counted as unsheltered. What the trend tells me is that we're just not doing enough. The alarming memo that you mentioned that I woke up to this morning in the Washington Post regarding the freeze or the pause on federal grants is another indication that the need has been growing, but is going to continue to grow, especially if the current administration continues in the direction that it has started, which is to attack those who are most vulnerable and to pause supports that they really need to receive the help that can help to rebuild their lives. Here in North Carolina, I think we need to press our local governments and our state governments to resist in ways that are possible so that the funds that are available can continue to come into our communities, and so that we are more creative and more coordinated in order to meet the needs of the most vulnerable people in our state.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. So in looking at North Carolina, but also since we brought up the federal news and we're we're both kind of trying to understand what that fully means. Can you talk about what you're watching out for this legislative session at the state level?
Yeah, at the state level, we are still pressing for adequate funding for our neighbors in Western North Carolina who are in the midst of recovery from Hurricane Helene. We know that it's not in the news every day because so many other things are happening, but our neighbors there are still suffering. Our neighbors there still need a lot of help, and that help requires funding. And so one of the things that we would be looking for in the current legislative session here in North Carolina is for those funds to get to Western North Carolina and other parts of our state where people are experiencing homelessness and need that support. I think on the federal level, we, touched on it a little bit this morning. You mentioned it in your remarks. We first need to figure out, to what extent is this administration going after vulnerable people? The indication that it is coming out very strong and with increasing and clear intentionality, everything related to diversity, everything related to equity, I would say everything related to justice, and having a society where all people can flourish, those things are under attack. And so what I'm looking for and hoping for is that people who have a different vision for North Carolina and for our nation will resist these efforts. On the ground, of course, that looks like putting forth bills that counter these efforts, but also advocating for those of us who are not legislators or lobbyists. We can still call our representatives, we can send emails, we can create sign-on letters to let folks know that this is not right and that we will not go silent. We will not be silent and continue to resist their efforts.
Wonderful. And I guess my last question for you is twofold. Can you, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today? And in particular, what is bringing you hope?
What brings me hope is being in partnership with organizations like the Housing Coalition and our other partners around the state. What brings me hope is that I work with an incredible group of people who are very dedicated to this work, just like you. And I know that despite what's happening at the federal level and the confusion that is being created and the fear that is being created, that is not the dominant voice in our society. We know that there are people who believe in equality. There are people who believe that housing is a human right and that everyone has the right to flourish. And what's bringing me hope is that perhaps through this wake-up call, we will all continue to work together because our collective voice is powerful, and power is created through the voice and the will of the people. So my hope is that in the midst of this, we'll find more collaboration and more innovation to solve the problems that we know are going to only increase without our participation.
Dr. Ray, thank you so much for joining us again. I always love having you on the Housing Call, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, and with our last minute, again, I just want to let you all know, especially if you're subscribed to our newsletter and you get our emails, there will be an action alert coming into your inboxes later from just about a call to action, really about contacting your federal representatives about the recent memo released on the temporary pause of federal agency grant, loan, and other financial assistance programs. In other news, I just want to list up that we are going to have a presence in the General Assembly this week, so I will be there tomorrow as well as Thursday. The House and Senate will be convening tomorrow, and then there will also be a House Select Committee on Helene recovery at 2 p.m. And then Thursday morning at 9, there will be a Joint Legislative Commission on Governmental Operations Subcommittee on Hurricane Response and Recovery. So disaster recovery is definitely a theme, a key topic that will be discussed this week. And I'm looking forward to meeting new members and reconnecting with members that are returning. If you have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to lift up one more event on February 5th. there will be a Western North Carolina town hall, a virtual town hall. Now that federal funding for Helene recovery has been secured, although now this OMB memo will likely impact it, it's important that we let our state policymakers know that it's important for them to work together and fill in the remaining funding gap for a full and inclusive recovery for North Carolina. So on February 5th, 2025, from 7 to 8 p.m., so this is next Wednesday, our partners at the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, the North Carolina Inclusive Disaster Recovery Network, and MDC Inc. are holding a telephone town hall event for Western North Carolinians affected by the hurricane in order to share their stories and lift up their needs. State lawmakers and other members of the North Carolina Inclusive Disaster Recovery Network, as well as thousands of Western North Carolinians in disaster-declared counties have been invited. So we ask you to join us to listen to these voices of those impacted, help us amplify their needs, and lift them up to our state decision makers as they continue to consider additional relief packages for the region. Everyone is welcome. In order to register for the event, we'll include a link in our call notes, and the deadline to register is tomorrow. You'll receive a follow-up email with more information, and all the information that you submit in the form is confidential. Thank you all for your time this morning. Like we mentioned, we'll be sending more communication out later on today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.